All right, today we're talking about how to marry exceptional customer service with technology in order to build a lasting legacy as an agency. My guest today is Steve Zehngut. I'm going to tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran. I am the host of this show, and every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. And if you check out the archives, we've got Netflix and Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. Lots of great episodes for you to check out, so check those out. And before we get into this interview, this episode is brought to you by our company Rise 25, where we help businesses to give to, connect with their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you to run your podcast. We're the easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast along with content marketing. We do the strategy, we do the accountability, and we do the full execution. We've invented the platform, which some are calling the Wix of B2B podcasting, Podcast Copilot. And Steve, I know you are a big fan of building relationships. That's why we connected through Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a big component of that is relationship building. And so I'm just absolutely super delighted to have you here today and interview you. And it's one of the pleasures of my life to be able to not just do it myself, but also help other companies to do that. And so if anyone wants to learn more about what we do, you can go to rise25.com and learn more about it. But let me tell you about Steve. So Steve is the founder of Zeek Interactive, served as the company's CEO until February of 2024 and handed off the reins, and then also sold the company. So we're going to talk about that as well. But he started Zeek Interactive back in 1995, back when many people were just getting onto the information superhighway, as they called it, or the World Wide Web, as they called it back in the day. And he, this is an amazing success story because the company is still around today, and you've worked with companies like Amazon and Sony and Disney and Honda. And I just would, I'm dying to hear these stories around what that was like. Finally, after 29 years, he sold it. He's also been really well known in the WordPress community as well, sharing his insights around that for many years now. Steve, such a pleasure having you here today. But all that is really cool and interesting, but I love to get to know people, what they were like as a kid. And you grew up, your father was an entrepreneur. He had a picture frame shop. And you went to work at age 8 in Dad's shop. So tell me a little bit about what young Steve was doing at 8 years old.
I did. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's always good to see you. It's great to get to know you more, and so I'm happy to be here. My dad, like I said, my dad was an entrepreneur. Was an entrepreneur my whole life. It's really all I knew. He had a picture frame shop and art gallery, and so. This was back in Cincinnati. He had a store which did custom picture framing, or if you wanted to save money, he had do-it-yourself picture framing in the front of the store. He had about 6 booths set up with a miter, a mitering tool. I forget. I don't even know what it was called.
Sounds like a liability to me. Like people cutting off fingers in the front of
this was the 70s. It was a different time. So
okay, all right.
It was let's call it a mitering vice grip is what it was. It was a special device where you kind of put the frame in, and then literally we were handing people a hammer, nails, things to cut the mat. Literally, people were using glass cutters to cut the glass.
Oh God.
It was do it yourself with no waivers.
Oh God.
And my dad gave me the job of training people on how to build a picture frame. And so at 8 years old, what's that?
At age 8, here's my 8-year-old's going to teach you how to use this piece of saw machinery.
That's what I did. I don't believe I was getting paid, but I was working for tips. So, and again, I learned very young, how to greet somebody and smile and treat them nicely, and then they would give me a dollar or whatever it was, and so that's how I spent my days.
Well, those are important lessons that you carry with you through life. Sometimes I interview people and they grew up in a in a family that had a business, or a parent that had a business, and they had to work in it, and they run as far away as possible. They're like, I don't, this isn't for me. I want just a stable job. It sounds like that didn't happen for you.
I did not want to be in the picture framing business, right? So
Yeah.
that story's kind of it half applies to me. I think my parents may have wanted me to take over this business for them. I worked in the business off and on throughout age probably 16. And then it wasn't really a business that interested me. I actually always wanted to make films. Growing up, that's all I wanted to do was be in the movie business. And
Ah,
that's what I studied in college.
who are you the biggest fan of? Like what filmmakers?
Spielberg. Like that was it.
Of
For me,
course.
for me
Of
that was it. I
course.
mean, that's
Close Encounters, E.T.,
well,
Jaws,
Raiders is my favorite movie of all time.
Raiders. Okay, got it.
That's it to me. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that like to me, he was just he was a legend. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I just grew up studying him and studying everything he did and just knowing everything about Spielberg.
Yeah. I mentioned to you earlier that my dad was a film critic when I was growing
Yeah.
up. So I saw movies all the time. And sometimes we'd see them before they came out, which was super cool. Eventually he got it mailed, the VHSs and the DVDs for the movies that they were sent out to the Academy. So you'd get
Yeah.
all these, which was really cool. And my dad, still alive, he's 82 years old. Spielberg was his biggest, filmmaker that he was biggest fan of. And one time Spielberg said to him, "You're the only critic that I watch." And my
Wow.
dad has been living off of that compliment for
Wow.
the rest of his life. Yeah, he
Amazing.
absolutely loved it. Yeah, yeah. But Spielberg is the best. I mean, absolutely amazing. And there's a great documentary on Disney Plus about his collaborator, blanking on it, the symphony guy
Oh,
from the
John
Boston
Williams.
Pops, John Williams. Yes, of course. Great
I,
documentary about
I
that.
will tell you, this is going out to the public anyway. My kids, their great uncle is actually John Williams. My
Great
ex-wife
uncle.
is his niece.
Wow. So you married in, so you, that's how
I
much of a fan you were. I'm going to marry my way
it
into this.
was not on purpose. I didn't know it. I didn't know it until I was actually married into that family. But yeah, my kids all have a musical a little bit of a musical gift.
Well, a genius.
Yeah.
So like John Williams shows up at the wedding and you're like, "What? You're married? You're related to John Williams?"
He did not. He's a very private guy. I think throughout the entire marriage I met him twice, or I interacted with him twice.
Got it. So no, wasn't a conduit to hang out with Spielberg then, I
No,
guess. No.
no.
No. Yeah. All right. So, and you've got over your shoulder here a really cool old, I think that's an Apple IIe. Is that right?
That is a Macintosh Plus, actually. I
Okay.
think it's even older.
And
Yeah.
how did you, so you go from the film, you're fascinated with film. And how does that lead to your interest in tech?
So I'll tell you, I went to film school, graduated, and while still in film school, got a job in the industry. I worked at a post-production facility. I worked on several commercials. I worked on a few feature films. Um,
And you're
and
proud of?
well, the last movie I worked on was Forget Paris, the Billy
Okay.
Crystal movie.
Okay.
Um, and that was fun. It was, listen, I had a great experience. I liked being in the industry. What I didn't like was the drama.
Mm.
I just couldn't take the drama, and I knew even at a young age just wasn't the right fit for me. And so I lasted about 3 years and then moved on. I was always a computer geek. Before it was cool, I was a computer geek, and
Hmm.
so went and got a job in graphic design to kind of learn the computer, and then eventually started my business.
And what was that like? How did you start? Like, what were the very early days? I mean, we're talking June of '95. Were you designing websites, or was it
So
something else at that time?
here's actually how it all came to be. And so my boss at the time, one of my mentors, his name is Jeff Turner. I went to work for him doing graphic design. What I was doing was I was on a small team that was creating newspaper ads. We're specifically creating auto ads for the LA Times and the Daily News.
Oh, that's got a
And
great future ahead of you, I can tell. Yeah, that's
so
great. Great.
I was literally working third shift. My shift started at 5 p.m. We were
Mm,
working until about 3 a.m. And the reason was because the creative had to be turned around for the next day to present to the car dealers. And we had a very tight deadline, had to be done by, we started on Monday, had to be done by Thursday for the Sunday newspaper because
Yeah.
it printed on Fridays.
And you reminded me, like these car ads were everything back then. These
These were
massive car, because
full page car
they
ads.
didn't have a website, so it was like
No.
all the cars that they were selling with pictures and details of all the
Yes.
different cars and full page ads.
Yeah, this was 1993, 92,
Okay.
93. And so because I was working third shift, and because we're talking 93 age computers, to print a full page car ad with 4 panels, because we're talking CMYK, just to print it took about 45 minutes.
Mm.
And so we design it and then we have to send it to print. And I just had all this downtime in the middle of the night. And so on the shelf, Jeff had a copy of Macromedia Director. I don't know if you remember that program. And so
Yeah.
I cracked it open, put it on my computer, and I started teaching myself how to code in the middle
Wow.
of the night. And so that's what
Wow.
I was doing. And so once the web started to form, I also started learning some early HTML and started learning about the web. And I wrote a business plan for Jeff to start a division of his company, basically as a website services type of division, right?
By
And
the
this is
way, I can see where this is going because this happens so often. Enterprising, young, up and coming, upstart employee says, I got this great idea. Why don't we add this new division? And then they present it to the boss, and the boss is like, nah, we ain't going to do that.
close, very
Okay.
close.
All right.
And Jeff loved it. He was a visionary. He could see the future. Absolutely loved it. His business partner at the time who was the finance guy, could not see the future and said,
Mm.
"No, we're not going to do that. This is our core business." And so I resigned
Mm.
and started Zeek.
So no clients yet.
I literally resigned with no clients, no business plan, no money,
Wow.
no equipment,
And you needed some
just an
expensive
idea.
equipment back then. Like that,
Yeah.
building that kind of stuff was not easy.
Yeah. And I just had an idea. And
Wow.
so I just decided to go on this venture and started talking to anybody who would listen about, what I was offering.
So you're really, I mean, this is real visionary stuff because if in 94, 95, whenever this is, you're thinking like everyone's going to have a website, that was not a foregone conclusion for many people at that point in time. They're like, oh, the web is a fad or something like that.
I cannot tell you how many times I heard what you just said.
Hmm.
The web is a fad. I probably heard it for a decade.
Wow. Wow. So how did you get your early clients then?
Yeah, great question. So, like I said, I was just a hustler, and so I took meetings with anybody who would listen and so the meetings weren't just, I wasn't just selling my services. I was actually had to educate them as to what this even was at the
Mm.
time, because nobody understood what this meant. They'd heard things, they kind of got the concept, but I was educating and selling at the same time. And it took probably a year and a half, 2 years before I got my first paying client.
Wow.
I was
Wow.
doing a little bit of freelance. I was teaching at a local college. I was teaching multimedia
Hmm.
development at a local college to kind of pay the bills. And finally got my first paying client. Here's how it worked. I led a user group at the Los Angeles Macintosh Group. So the LAMG had I think they called them user groups. They were actually they weren't called meetups yet. They were called SIGs, special interest groups, right? And
Okay.
so
That
so
didn't stick.
yeah. So I led the Macromedia Director SIG, which was basically the multimedia SIG or the CD-ROM SIG or whatever
Yeah.
you wanted to call it. That's what we were producing at the time. And I was doing this for free. It was on a voluntary basis. I was doing it to network and to just meet people in the community. And the LAMG held a annual show in Burbank. They had a conference, and because I had built this SIG and volunteered my time, they gave me a booth for free at the conference. And so what I decided to do was, rather than build a booth, I just took this space and we built a lounge, within the middle of the conference.
Yeah.
And we called it the Shockwave Lounge. I don't know if you remember the technology Shockwave. This is kind of pre-Flash. So
Okay.
Shockwave was an early way to put multimedia within a web browser. It was a
Okay.
Macromedia product. So there was Shockwave and then there was Flash. So this was pre-Flash. We called it the
Okay.
Shockwave Lounge. We had a like a used couch and a used coffee table.
Okay.
We had a coffee maker, and I set up a sign, and I put a computer in the middle of the on the coffee table, and I just invited people to come and sit down, and I would show them what we were doing. And at the very last hour of the conference, this woman sat down, and I showed her what we're doing, and she said, "Oh, I'm the so and so, I forget her title, but she was at an ad agency. She said, I'm actually looking for this for a movie that we're promoting right now. So I'd love for you to come in and present what you're doing."
To
Um,
promote the movie, like a
so
movie
this was
promotional
this
website.
was a
Okay.
movie promotional website.
Okay. Okay. Lots of movie and film studios around there, around that area. Yeah.
she wanted an arcade built for this movie website. So the movie was Multiplicity, the Michael Keaton movie.
Okay. Okay.
Called me in on that next Monday, and we were working.
Wow.
She hired us on the spot, and so we
Wow.
built a 5 game arcade for the movie Multiplicity, and that was our first big paying job.
Wow. That sounds like a complex website. Like
It
not
was
easy.
at the time it was revolutionary.
Yeah.
The site won a bunch of awards. We got a an accidental nickname out of the site. I can keep geeking out on this
What
for
was
as
the
long as you
accidental
want, but
nickname?
so the it was a 5 game arcade, and we built these 4 games that they had given us documentation for, and they left the last one open to our interpretation. And frankly, we had forgotten all about it until the very last week of the contract, and they said, "Oh, you owe us a 5th game." And so
You like
I went to my
Pong.
business. Yeah, I went to my
Yeah.
business partner at the time, and do you remember the inflatable clown toys
Yeah,
that
you
you
punch them
it was
and yes,
you
yeah.
punch them and they'd rock back.
Did
And then
one of
I
those
said,
digital.
and on a conference call with the client, I said, "How about punch the clown?"
Mm,
And they went, "We love it, right?"
cool.
And I literally, I made and programmed Punch the Clown in 24 hours.
I'm
Right?
sure it looked very hyper realistic.
It was awful. But it became the one thing on that website that everybody went to. Like
It was
it
like
was
viral,
so
right? It's
stupid
fun.
simple. It was
Right,
so
yeah.
stupid simple, and it became the Shockwave game of the week, and then the game of the
Mm.
month, or whatever. They gave all these awards, and so Zeke became the Punch the Clown guys. And so when we were introduced in meetings, literally people would say, "Oh,
These are
you're
punch
the
the clown.
it's the Punch the Clown guys." So it stuck, and it worked.
So, and that this doesn't sound like a small website to program. Did you have to, hire people and everything to build this thing?
No, it was
No,
all it was me.
you.
I
Wow.
was I was selling during the day, and I was programming at night, and I was getting about 2 hours sleep, and I was just grinding.
And then did that lead to creating other movie websites as well after that?
Yeah, so throughout the 90s we did a ton of advert games. Like that's what they were called at the
Yeah.
time. And so we weren't really a website agency yet. And so up until about 2000, advert gaming was what we did. And so we
Mm,
built about 100 different advert games.
mm.
That was our bread and butter. We were building websites as a kind of a line item, and then we formed ourselves into a full service web shop around 2000.
Got it. And so, of course, something else big happened around 2000. That was around the time of the meltdown. Now you're not near Silicon Valley, you're entertainment industry,
I,
but it was the shockwaves were felt everywhere. But what was that like for you?
we were right in the middle of the .com boom. Like we were right down the street from eToys,
Hmm.
Pets.com. I mean, they were right up. They were
Yeah.
literally up the street on
I knew
Pico.
people that worked for eToys at the time.
Yeah,
That was a big .com failure.
yeah. My
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my buddy left a high paying job at one of the big agencies to go work at eToys.
Yeah.
Um, And so, yeah, I lived right through that crash. That was March 2001, was that dot com bubble crash. And literally overnight, I couldn't get a client on the phone.
Mm.
And so we were about 10 people was the size of the agency at the time. And that was my worst day I've ever had in business. I had to literally within 24 hours lay everybody off. Um,
24 hours after this crash, or
It crashed.
yeah,
I couldn't get a single client on the phone, and the ones that were reaching out to us basically said, "Stop.
can't
All work is
stop everything.
halted. All
Oh
work is
wow.
halted."
So we're
So
looking back on it now, because you mentioned like it sounded like it was a big studio was your first client,
mm,
but were you over concentrated in startups? Was that what
no,
was the reason?
actually, we avoided all startups. There were no dot coms that we were working with. It was all very large entertainment clients and some corporate
Wow,
clients. Even
wow.
them, they were. I mean, it sent a rippling effect through the entire industry. So any digital work was just halted
Yeah. Well, I
overnight.
guess a big part of it was also just there was kind of backlash against the whole .com boom, and people thought everything with the web was bad at that period of time. And
In
yeah,
in March 2001, the web was dead. Like
yeah,
those were the headlines. The web was dead, and
yeah.
I'm right in the middle of it, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, I had to unfortunately lay everybody off, and
Mm.
I moved out of the office and moved into my garage.
Wow. What was that like for you? I mean, that's like setting you back 6 years from where you
Yeah.
started.
It was hard. It was hard financially. It was hard emotionally. It was just rough. But I just what kept me going through all of it was I had this belief that this was not a fad. It was not going away. This was the future. I mean, that's really what I founded the company on, and it was just it was my belief throughout that entire period. And after about a year and a half, um, I was still around. I was still working, even though it was smaller. I was still working. But once the dust settled and it was starting to rise back up again, I was the only surviving agency left in the area. Right,
Wow.
all of the big five had gone out of business, and now people were looking to do work again. My phone started ringing, and from there on, it never stopped.
Hmm. Um, so you kind of build back up again. What did going through that experience, how did that affect you during later meltdowns and downturns?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, even though it was a rough experience, that was probably the best lesson I ever got in business, right? It taught me firsthand how to be prepared for that in the future because I wasn't prepared for that in 2001. So I was well prepared in 2008 when we hit a recession. I was very prepared, when COVID hit in 2020, right? Those recessions actually didn't affect the agency at all. As a matter of fact, we
Hmm.
thrived.
Hmm.
But what I really learned was how to because I lived through it. I learned what the proper narrative was in any economy, right? And so to me,
Narrative externally or narrative to your team or both?
a little bit of both, but really what I was referring to was externally. So my when I was talking to prospects or existing business, right? Um, the way at least Zeek worked in a down economy, or when we were facing a down economy, was this. Listen, I call my clients and say, listen, I know we may be entering a rough patch, right? Or something happened that is causing a rough patch, right? You may be laying people off, or you may be slimming down your internal departments, but the work still needs to get done, right? Our agency is a great alternative for you, right? Let me tell you what that looks like. And I'm not here to replace anybody. If you hire everybody back, we have a great transition plan for you. But let me tell you why we're a fraction of the cost of your internal team. And that was really you get where this is going. That was sort of the
Yeah.
narrative
You have to change
storytelling of my
the way
agency.
that you sell to be responsive to the situation on the ground.
Yeah, and ultimately, what it meant was in any economy or any conversation I was having with a client is Zeek was set up as a partner, right? That was my big message from 2000 before 2001. Before that happened, we really acted as a vendor, right? And I didn't
Hmm.
know it, but it just
Hmm.
naturally, because I was sort of young and inexperienced, it was a client vendor relationship. After 2001, the clients that stuck with me, and the new clients that I was getting out of that period, my conversation was just different. It was just naturally different, right? Because they stuck with me, they were loyal. I was loyal to them. We were having more partnership types of conversations, right? And so throughout any economy or whatever the environment looked like, from that point forward, I always treated my clients as partners. And that was the conversation we'd have, meaning we're in it with you for the long haul, right? Good
Yeah.
or bad, right? Lean or not, we're here to help just to help you get through this. We're here to make you a hero. We're acting as your partner, right? And that's the conversation that really shifted for us.
Okay, so if I'm listening to this and I'm an agency owner and I'm thinking, well, that's all well and good. I want that too. I want to be a partner with my clients. What are some specific things you would say to them that they need to do in order to make that transition from being a vendor to being a partner with their clients?
So the first things first, you have to choose your clients wisely, right? And so I think where a lot of agencies um, miss the mark is they're not just not choosing, right? So they're just taking any work that comes their way, right? And again, I was there as a new agency. That's what we did. Whatever
Yeah.
work came our way, my philosophy is all work is good work, right? If it's paying, it's good work, right? That's not true, right? All work is not great work, is not good work. When you're an agency, you have to find the partners that fit your values, right? And so really for me, all goes back to values, right? So we defined our values really early, lived our values, and we sought out partners, right, to work with that matched our values, right?
Mm.
Because again, one of the things I just realized after being in business for 3 decades was no matter what the size of the contract was, if a partner didn't match our values, it wasn't worth taking.
Mm.
There's so many things that cost you as an agency when you take on a client that doesn't match your values. So the choosing part is sort of the first part. And if you choose right, that solves a lot of the problems down the road, right? So
Hmm.
most things can be if things go wrong, you kind of look back to, well, did I enter into a relationship that was a bad fit?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I want to ask you about technology because you are here at the kind of the bleeding edge of all these different technologies.
Yeah.
Technologies have changed dramatically over the last 30 years. A big development was WordPress, which now runs, I don't know, something like a third or
43, 43% of the
43%.
entire internet.
Wow. I think it came out in 2002,
Yeah,
2003.
it's a little over 20 years old.
Okay. What was that like for you when you kind of discovered this technology coming on the scene? And at what point did you decide I'm going all in on this? Because you really became a foremost expert on it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm definitely I'm in the WordPress community, right? We definitely used WordPress as our primary CMS when we were building websites. It wasn't our only tool in our toolbox, right? But I was big into the WordPress community, and so let me just backtrack a moment to explain that. One of the things that we did with WordPress around 2010. My business partner, actually, so I mentioned Jeff Turner was my mentor back in the day. For a while, he actually was my business partner. So
Mm.
from about 2005 to 2010, he was my business partner. And so Jeff and I were sitting in the office one time. We had a lot of work. We had some overflow that we couldn't handle. And we said, okay, I said to him, how are we going to manage this? He said, what I want to do is start a meetup, right? We're going to find the local talent here in Orange County, and then we'll just refer the work to them or bring them in on subcontractors. So we founded a WordPress meetup in order to give work out to other
Mm.
people, right? And just based on that, it became accidentally became a community that really just wanted to pay it forward. The whole community was about giving. So it was a WordPress community, but it was really very much about paying it forward, helping each other out. And it was a very collaborative, great community. And so
Mm.
that WordPress meetup was built in 2010, grew that to about 2,500 members, even
Wow.
the local meetup. It's
Yeah,
pretty.
it's huge.
Couple of the guys that were in our meetup created the local WordCamp, Orange County WordCamp. I was on their
Hmm.
committee for that. I led that
Which is
WordCamp for.
the conference for people interested in WordPress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So WordCamp is what was and is the WordPress conference that is in every major city.
Hmm.
I was the lead organizer for that for 2 years. I was on the U.S. WordCamp team for a couple of years, specifically on the sponsorship team, so helping them raise money. And so that's my involvement in the WordPress space.
Yeah.
But back to your original question, how did I choose it? Right? I'd love to say there was a smart answer there. It was completely by accident, right? So a buddy of mine was a poker blogger at the time. That was a thing around the time that Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. Poker blogging was a thing. My
Yeah.
buddy made most of his income just blogging about poker,
Wow.
and I got a client at the time that needed a um, blog built.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
was considering movable type, which was the WordPress competitor at the time. And I called my buddy Bill and I said, I just texted him. I said, movable type or WordPress. That
Hmm.
was it. And he said WordPress. And I went, okay, done. If it's good enough for Bill, it's good enough for me. That was it.
Hmm.
It was sheer luck.
Yeah, good choice. Yeah, I remember I first discovered it around 2009. I was working, practicing attorney at the time for a law firm that had a horrible website. And this contractor came in and showed it to me and showed how we could use it. And it was such a revelation. It's just so much better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've mentioned a couple of times here, there's kind of an intersection for you between education, training, community, networking, and then all of that kind of leading into business. And I'm just kind of curious, did you realize at some point that that's kind of a superpower for you? Because I see it as a repeating theme. It's led to good things for you.
Yeah, and again, it was purely accidental. Again, like most of my career, frankly, I just tried a bunch of stuff, and so I was always a big believer, early on in the tech space that you know. Um, my philosophy has always been there's no reason to hold on to knowledge, right? There's no reason to hoard knowledge. And frankly, what I saw was and I hope I'm not going to insult anybody, right? But I saw in the IT community that there was this belief that knowledge was power or really job security, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
I was actually I didn't like that, and so I said, hey, listen, anything I learn, I'm going to share, right? So it's what I did with my special interest groups. It's what I did with my meetup. I just I was an open book, right? So if I knew something, I just was willing to share it with the world, right?
Mm, mm.
What that did as a byproduct is it made me into a thought leader, within my communities, made me into a thought leader, in the WordPress space. And yeah, I was just able to help people while also building my business at the same time. So it served a couple of different purposes. But yes, the short answer to your question is I've always had a belief that I want to pay it forward, help
But it's,
people.
it's interesting because that approach is kind of similar to the trajectory with WordPress. Like you hooked your wagon to the right, technology,
Yep.
and kind of what you said about this approach to open knowledge. Well, now it's even more accessible than it was 10 years ago. And knowledge is everywhere, right? And so, those who took the approach of I'm not going to share my knowledge, like I'm sorry, but people can get knowledge everywhere. So you're going to be losing out.
That's right. And frankly, those people have become obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's also, and I hope I'm not stepping on a segue here, but that's also really what attracted me to EO, right? EO is an extension of all of
Yeah.
this. It's very much about entrepreneurs, paying it forward and pushing other entrepreneurs, and helping them grow their businesses,
Yeah,
right?
and
That's
obviously we connected through EO, but how did you discover it? When did you it sounded like you'd built a fairly large business by that point.
yeah.
I was a different experience. I was struggling to build a big business, and the EO Accelerator program helped me to get over that hurdle. But for you, like how did you discover it?
So my best friend Neil Thornhill is in the EO LA chapter, and he was telling me about EO for Probably 15 years.
Hmm.
I think he's been in EO for about 15 years. And he was telling me about it from day one, how great it was. He was building his business at the same time I was building it. And my response was, yeah, I don't have time for something like that. Right. There's no way that I have time to do a monthly meeting and go on an annual retreat and go on all these trips. I'm busy building my business. So I sounded like every other EO prospect. Right.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
The
just
funny thing is, you and I both do membership now,
right.
and every single person we talk to say, I don't have the time for it.
Right, right. Looking back on it, right? So I joined about 4 years ago, and but looking back on it, I wish I had joined when Neil first started bugging me about it,
Yeah.
because I would have grown my business even sooner.
Yeah. And I want to get to what you did in order to replace yourself in that business. You okay on time if I ask you a question about
Sure.
project management? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I know project management and account management are two concepts that come up a lot in the agency world, and you have some thoughts on how to approach those. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, um, I've advised a lot of agencies on how to grow, and the role I usually see that's neglected is account management or misunderstood is account management. Here's how we broke it out at Zeek, right? There's project management, and the project manager is really, in my mind, responsible for tactical things, budget, schedule, resourcing. That they're there to make sure that the project gets done. Right, that's their whole job is move the project forward at the pace that makes sense and deliver what we promised to the client. Right, that's a project manager role. It is very tactical. It's sometimes a little gruff, right? It can be very linear.
Hmm.
And so what I was seeing was clients would call me, right? And they'd say, I'm not getting a lot of warm fuzzies from your project manager. And I'd say, right, it's by design, right?
Yeah.
That's on purpose. Their job is to get your project done, right? And so once I started seeing that, I started replacing the me part of it.
Because you were effectively the account manager.
I
If
was the
if
account
they're
manager.
complaining to you, then you're effectively
Right.
the account manager.
And so what I did is I put an account manager in place. Their whole job, they were on the project management calls, but their job was to call or be in touch with the client outside of the production meetings, of the
Hmm.
project management meetings, right? Their whole job was to give the client a hug. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's literally that's how I defined their job description was you're the warm fuzzy person, right? You're there to call the client, make sure that they're happy, everything's on track. If something's wrong, I want you to discover that.
Mm.
But more importantly, as an agency owner, the account manager's secondary job is to uncover new business, right? So
Mm.
by making those calls, right, they're naturally going to start to uncover new business because one of the follow-up questions I'd give them is, hey, why don't you tell me about your business, right? Tell me
Mm.
about where you want to go. Tell me about your growth. What other initiatives are you working on that we're not aware of, right? Those are just natural conversations that an account manager can have. So they served a couple of different purposes, but once we split out those roles, clients were really, way happier,
Yeah.
uh, just because
It,
they had somebody to vent to.
yeah. Yeah. And probably you too, because got back a little bit more of your time. You didn't have to be the person who was performing that function.
At one point, I think I was spending 100% of my time doing account management, which is
Wow,
what,
that's exhausting. That's
yeah.
exhausting. Before we get to the end of this, I want to be sure to ask about you've got some real marquee clients: Amazon, Sony, Disney, Honda. Um, I don't know what you did for all these different clients, but tell a little bit about like any crazy stories about working with any of these marquee clients.
Oh, I've got a ton of them. I think um, one of my favorite uh, Disney stories is we worked on so I did the website for the Waterboy. We did a lot
Okay,
of Adam Sandler
Adam
work.
Sandler. Okay,
Did
good.
a lot
Yeah.
of Adam Sandler work. I did the sites for Just Go With It, Jack and Jill, but the Waterboy was a fun one.
Okay.
Uh, but it was a very rushed project. And our point of contact at Disney was pulled in multiple different directions at the time. She had lots of movies that were coming out at the same time that she had to work on, and so the website was very, let's say, neglected, right?
Mm.
And I'm not blaming her. I'm not, like, she was doing just fine. She just had a lot on her plate, and so I remember about all we got for The Waterboy was we got called in to see a rough cut of the movie The Waterboy.
Hmm.
Um, no music. The dialogue was not polished. It was a very rough cut, and I honestly didn't know what to make of the movie. Right, right. And just like every time I went in to screen a movie or went in to meet with to meet with an executive, in Hollywood, they were very excited about the movie, and so also needed to be very excited about the movie. I wasn't.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wasn't. So I don't know what came out of my mouth, right, when they asked me, so what do you think? Right. And it was one of those things where I went, it's
Yeah.
great. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm sure it didn't leave a great impression. We did a great job. It was a rush job, but that was fun. And there were
Yeah.
lots of them like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard thing when you see a movie early on before it's in its finished
Yeah.
product because and actually getting back to that John Williams documentary, they showed a clip from Jaws with the music and without the music. And without the music, it was like this is not a movie at
Yeah,
all, you
absolutely.
know? But the music just completely made it. Yeah.
And listen, I mean, The Waterboy is an iconic Adam Sandler movie.
Yeah.
It's quotable. Everybody knows it, right? And so
Yeah.
just one of those moments where I was just like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Any stories around Amazon, which of course that was one of the early websites out there.
yeah. Actually, Amazon was a recent one. That was my last project that I worked on at Zeek, and so we,
Wow, even more impressive because I mean
yeah.
that's incredible to think that they are hiring outside agencies at the size that they're at now.
So I'll tell you how we got that one. And so we did a payment plugin for WordPress for Amazon. That was done about a year ago.
Hmm.
And so they have a new system they built called Amazon Pay for Services. I think it's called something else now, but that's what it was called at the time. And I got a random email that I thought I actually was going to just trash it. I thought it was junk. It looked like a junk email,
Hmm.
and it said, "Hey, we're Amazon and we're looking for this. We're looking for somebody to possibly build a WordPress plugin, right?" Luckily, I responded. Um, they wrote me back and said, we got your name, you were referred, and we'd love to talk to you about this. And there were a ton of competitors that were bidding on this project. And so what I did is um, looked at their statement of work, looked at what they wanted, and sort of went back into 1995 Zeek mode. I I pulled a few all-nighters
Mm.
and put together a prototype.
Mm.
Um, and so rather than telling them what we're going to do, because this was Amazon, right? I wanted to show them what we could do. And
Mm.
so a week later, we had an introductory phone call, and I said, and got to meet them, and I said, hey, rather than tell you what we're going to do, why don't I just show you what we've already done?
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
And I pulled up WordPress and I showed them the plugin and I said, some of these things are placeholder for now, but I've already got what you want working within
Mm.
WordPress. Here it is. And I was able to show them the plugin functioning. And at that point, I don't think they were considering anybody else. And
Mm.
so, I just got scrappy because
Yeah.
it's a project I wanted and it worked.
Um, so you've been running the company for about 28, 29 years here at this point, and you decide to replace yourself. You hire actually a COO, and this woman eventually becomes president and eventually buys the company. But what led first to replacing yourself, and how hard was that process of replacing yourself in the company?
Yeah, so here's actually how it went. So right before I joined EO, I was getting a little burned out. Frankly, it was it was 25 years into this business and I was still working 70-hour weeks.
Mm.
Um, um, my wife recommended that I read Rocket Fuel.
Hmm.
She's a
It's
she
one of the EOS business books in the canon.
Yep. So she practices EOS in her business and knew about this. And frankly, she told me, you need an integrator, right?
Mm.
And I think my response was, what are you talking about? I'm a great integrator, right? Nobody
Yeah.
nobody integrates better than Steve, right?
Now let
Uh,
me tell you about this new idea I have.
right. Um, um, I, I read the book and I came back to her with my tail between my legs and said, I'm a visionary. Right? She said, yeah, I know. I said, I now understand the difference. And I said, so I need to hire an integrator. And so that's what I did. I hired an integrator and once so that was one journey that was going on for me. And I joined EO at the same time. So I was hearing other people's experience share about how they separated those things out. And that just, freed up all of my time and more importantly, my headspace.
Was
Uh,
it hard to accept the fact that you could be replaced in your business and you weren't as needed at that point?
John, it was the probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I'd love to say it was easy, but if Elizabeth was here, who we're talking about, she would tell you, no, she had to basically pull the integration stuff away from me, kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
I was throwing tantrums constantly.
Not
It took,
easy for her too. Like you're
no,
stepping in as a new person in this
no,
company to perform that role and say to the guy who's been running it for
yeah,
28 years, like, no, don't touch, don't
yeah,
touch.
yeah. Pardon my French, but yeah, I was a little bitch. Um, and so, and again, she would tell you the same story. But once we got over that hurdle, and I started trusting the process, and again, it took me 9 to 12 months. Once I started trusting the process and trusting her and letting go of things, once that happened, I let go of everything. It was, once I flipped the switch, it was easier. But no, getting there was difficult. It was rocky.
And then who brought up the topic of you eventually selling it to her?
So, so I did. So what happened was I actually started exploring this without her knowledge. And so kind of went down the road of what an exit would look like. I think she knew I eventually wanted to exit, but I was accelerating the process. And then once I brought her into the loop, she threw her hat into the ring and she ended up buying it.
That's great. And then that's nice because it creates greater stability for the company. You knew it was a known entity.
I got to tell you, John, the whole process was seamless, right?
Mm.
The staff was retained. To them, it was business as usual. We came up with a great transition plan for how I exited, and the company still really is going strong. So it was my biggest thing was I didn't want any disruption to my team. My team excuse me, the team's been with the company for a long time, and I just wanted to make sure that they were everything was consistent for them.
And did you was selling the company as hard, harder, not as hard as stepping out of the role of being CEO?
Selling the company was a piece of cake.
Mm.
Okay, because Elizabeth was essentially running the company already. She there really wasn't any due diligence, and so the narrative to the bank was really easy. Everybody that was involved in the process was they got it,
Mm.
and Elizabeth and I were aligned on everything. So there really wasn't any due diligence or any negotiation. We
Yeah.
were just aligned and just made it happen. The whole sale, start to finish, when she threw her hat in the ring, was about a month and a half. It was really
Wow.
fast.
Wow, that is really fast. Sometimes the challenge then for founders who sell their business is figuring out what they're going to do next. I know you're doing some fractional CTO work, consulting, helping companies with SaaS projects, software projects, that sort of thing. Did it take a while for you to figure out what you would end up doing after Zeek?
I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But I took a very short period of time off, probably about 15, 20 minutes. Um, it was a little bit longer than that. I mean, my wife wanted me to take a lot longer off, but this is what I know. I like working, right? So,
Mhm.
working for me is it's enjoyable. And
Mhm.
so, I jumped right back into consulting, just helping people, wherever I can, mostly helping people with technical strategy.
Mhm.
Um, I, I I like helping, especially when software projects have gone off the rails, helping them kind of get back on track and
Mhm.
right the ship. And so I've been doing some of that. I jumped back into code. And so, sort of dusted off my coding skills and, I spend some parts of my day, writing code, especially writing SaaS. I see some opportunities, for some SaaS products. So that's where my head's at right now.
Cool. All right. I want to wrap up with my last question, which is a gratitude question. This has been great so far, Steve. Thank you so much for your time. But I'd love to hear from people, who they would want to thank in their journey. Any peers, contemporaries, mentors, friends, people who've been there, helping support them in the highs and the lows of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think the two that come to mind, I'm gonna miss a bunch. I mean, when you put me on the spot, I'm gonna miss a bunch. But the two that come to mind first. First of all, my wife, and so I really wouldn't be at this point without my wife's input and support. Right? She was able to spot the burnout. Spot the. She was able to help me uncover a lot of my blind spots. She's the one who pushed me to join EO
Mm,
eventually. Right? And so. I really wouldn't be here without Sam. And then second is my dad. Right, my dad
mm.
was my hero, he was my idol. And so he passed away about 7 years ago. And so that was hard. But um, I just look back at what my dad accomplished and who he was and there's a lot of really good lessons there. So those
Yeah.
are the two that come to mind immediately.
Steve, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, and ask you any questions if they haven't?
Probably LinkedIn is where I'm most active.
Okay.
That's probably the best place to find me. Um, a couple people have asked me recently, where's your website? I haven't built it yet. So LinkedIn's probably the
Give
best
the
place.
man some grace. He's built a lot of websites
Yeah.
in his time.
I always say the cobbler's son has no shoes in this
Yep.
case. So, but yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to get me.
Okay, cool. All right. Steve, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.